Hey everyone, Jody Avergan here. On Sundays over the course of the summer, July and August, we're going to be bringing you some of our favorite episodes from the archives. You're still going to get brand new episodes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but we're giving ourselves a little bit of a break on Sundays, running a previous episode. It's still from around the same date, so it will still hook in that way. But look, we've done about 450 of these. There's a good chance you haven't heard this one or haven't heard it in a while and might want to re-listen. So here we go with a Sunday favorite from the archives. Hello and welcome to This Day in Esoteric Political History from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avergan. This day, 1956, President Eisenhower signs the Federal Highway Act of 1956. They called it the Federal Highway Act of 1956 because it was 1956, and that's just good naming conventions. But look, this is a bill that authorized $25 billion for the construction of 41,000 miles of the interstate highway system over a 10-year period. It was the largest public works project in American history up to that time. And of course, it transformed this country. It linked communities, created a bunch of infrastructure jobs, helped interstate commerce, and of course, ushered in the age of the automobile, largely, I would say, at the expense of other forms of transportation. So, here to discuss the bill, its effects, intended and not, are, as always, Nicole Hammer of Columbia and Kellie Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello there.
Hello, Jody.
Hey there.
And our special guest for this episode is Eddie Alterman, longtime editor of Car and Driver magazine and host of the new podcast Car Show from our friends at Pushkin Industries. Eddie, welcome to the program. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you, and it's great to be with you all.
So Car Show has an exclamation point at the end. Do you always feel like you have to have it come across with an exclamation point?
Yeah, it helps me deliver it a little bit.
Yeah, it's fun to say. Car Show. So there's so much to talk about here, including, I think, legacy and all these sort of big policy questions. And we'll also just talk cars a little bit too. But the place I'm curious to start is really scale. Like I mentioned, it was the largest public works project in American history up to that time. If you had asked me, what are the largest public works, I would think about New Deal not that long before this, and that this dwarfed a lot of those projects is just kind of stunning.
Yeah, but it does have its origins in the New Deal, but it was on a much smaller scale. And it wasn't until Eisenhower got involved that the thing really took off and was funded, at a rate of, I think in today's dollars, would be $500 billion to get this thing done. And you wonder who would have the political will to do it now. But Eisenhower was a big believer in this after World War II because he saw what a advantage it was defensively to have a way to move materiel quickly across the country. Funnily enough, Eisenhower was part of a coast-to-coast military convoy, I think in 1919, moving tanks and trucks across the country. It took 62 days to drive 3,200 miles, which is crazy. I mean, feels like you could bike faster.
Probably could.
And then when it was all done, it took 2 days to get coast to coast. So, I mean, just incredibly swift transportation. And, also you could land planes on it, which is a nice little side
nice
side
little
benefit.
Bonus.
Yeah.
I mean, 2 days coast to coast, I assume you're driving very fast and 24 hours a day.
Yes, nonstop.
Okay.
I've done it in 3. I've been across country a bunch of times, and I once just needed to get across, and I did it in 3. But when you said 2 days, I'm glad you picked that up, Niki. I was like,
somebody's not sleeping, or somebody's taking shifts.
Yeah, it's in shifts. The Cannonball Run, the coast to coast dash. I think they did that in something like 34 hours is the record. But so still 2 days is incredible.
Mm-hmm. Jody, this idea of it being a New Deal project, of course, it's a little different from the New Deal infrastructure projects because so many of those were based on trying to find ways to help an economy that was doing very poorly recover. And by the 1950s, the U.S. economy is doing okay. But it does benefit from being part of kind of the New Deal era, when this idea that the United States should spend a lot of money to do big things, and that it's a good thing for the government to create projects that employ people. That really is something that you can do in 1956 that you wouldn't have been able to do in, say, 1992, when the federal highway system is largely complete.
And we should also add that, there's a major ripple effect with this, meaning you don't just build roads and that's it. You have to have gas stations. You have to have places to eat along the way. There needs to be restaurants or hotels. There's such an expansive, interconnected ecosystem of what goes into just having highways and transportation. If you think of those long stretches where there's like nothing for miles, you really can't have that for too long before you have to hit some sort of pit stop. I think you can never underestimate all the things that go into just creating a highway like that. Yeah,
the knock-on effects to commerce. We saw it first with the railroads where towns would pop up around railroad stops. But this was, to another level because people could get off at any exit and fuel up. And it was, private transport, People were flying private, driving private.
And so, Eddie, what I like about Car Show is you talk about your love of cars as objects and as things that you drive. And then I think you do dip into some of the policy stuff we're touching on here, and we'll go back and forth in our conversation. But I'm curious, kind of to Kellie's point, in terms of the actual car culture that pops up because of highway. Do cars themselves get re-engineered to adapt to the highway system? Does car culture shift in some way now that there's these long stretches of road?
Absolutely. If you look at the Ford Model T, which was the car that put America on wheels, that was very agricultural. That was like the proto SUV. It was meant for rough, rutted roads, for fields, and there was great wheel articulation in those things, and they really were sort of off-roaders, in a manner of speaking. Not all-wheel drive, none of the new technology, but the car was much different, and emphasis on high-speed travel and comfort really came into play in the 60s and 70s. And I think, because Germany had such a great high-speed Autobahn system, the cars that really, defined German motoring did great here because we, prized the same things. Comfortable, quiet, long-legged cruising cars. Those are American cars. The Germans just sort of did a little bit better. But, if you think about the sort of tableau of, 60s America pulling a big Buick up to a Howard Johnson's, on the highway. That's like such a quaint American thing. And cars really did grow to adapt. And in fact, you think about Green Book America and how cars had to adapt to those customers and how the car had to be a hotel. In Green Book America in the South. You couldn't stop at a restaurant if you were black. You couldn't stop at a hotel. So the vehicles changed, the way we moved around changed, and, still limited in many ways for many people.
I remember my parents telling me stories because they're part of the Great Migration and going back south from Detroit back down to Louisiana or Mississippi and packing tons of food because there was no place to stop, and then having to either pull off to the side of the road to eat your lunch or take a break, and then you would go to one family member's house and then stop or go for several hours, and then maybe another stranger's home, but someone who was known to let you in. But that there's almost like a dual.
There was a parallel network.
Yes, set up. Yes.
And so there was tremendous segregation, and I'm speaking to you from Detroit, and Detroit was made by the car. It was sort of destroyed by the car in many ways. The great middle-class black neighborhood called Black Bottom was destroyed by 375 going through it. And so, there's a great article in The Atlantic that was just published about how in the 50s, highways were seen as a way to declog the cities. It was a way of clearing out the arteries and spreading everybody out. But the people who could spread out and move to the suburbs and afford the small bungalows and the cars that went with it and that life were generally white. They were not, they were not. It was not a multi-ethnic equivalent rise for everybody. And so the people who were left behind by the car and the highway got their neighborhoods trampled over, were often thrust into, government housing, and that part of the American dream became less available to them. So, they give and they destroy. They give and they take.
You're used to hearing my voice on the world, bringing you interviews from around the globe.
And you hear me reporting environment and climate news. I'm Carolyn Beeler.
And I'm Marco Werman. We're now with you hosting the world together. More global journalism with a fresh new sound.
Listen to The World on your local public radio station and wherever you find your podcasts.
There's also this issue of blight that comes along with these highways that's, in addition to destroying all of these neighborhoods and changing what cities look like, you have littering, which is rampant. You have all of these billboards going up, so much so that by the time that Lyndon Johnson comes into office in the mid-1960s, Lady Bird Johnson comes up with a highway beautification program. And so you have this kind of cleanup that's happening in the 1960s. That's sort of a surface level cleanup that doesn't recognize just the deep environmental damage that building these highways does, the destruction of the landscape, the moving of all of these cars, the reliance on petroleum, and the moving of all of these cars to the suburbs, which themselves are an ecological catastrophe because of the way that they affect the landscape. They introduce air conditioning. It's just, in the 1950s, are a disaster for the environment in the United States.
That's exactly right. And Kellie, you talked about New Orleans. My brother lives down there. And when I-10 runs down Callio, it's visual pollution. It totally destroys the downtown area, and it's like these hulking monolithic things that were made for the people who could afford them, and everybody else, had to deal with the consequence of it.
Yeah. I don't think we think about the displacement that comes along with that too. I mean, it's the excitement of like modern technology and all of these things, but not all of these empty spaces are quote unquote empty. There are people that live in these, rural spaces whose land gets, essentially taken over through eminent domain and all different kinds of policy where people are losing out on spaces that were part of their land.
That's right.
But on this question of kind of especially highways in rural areas versus highways in urban areas, I've been thinking about those two, and I think that even people who are car skeptics could maybe see a rationale for connecting two rural areas through a big interstate highway. Maybe they'll say there should be a train there, but so be it. But I guess one question I have is is it inherent that when you highwayify rural areas of this country, that then you were also going to end up putting a highway through New Orleans or having Robert Moses, put highways through the middle of the Bronx or whatever? Or was there a world in which cars connect the rural parts of this country, but cities don't become reorganized around the car in the way that they did?
Well, yeah. I mean, the East Coast fought it. New Jersey and Pennsylvania fought it tooth and nail for a long time. And I-95 was not really completed until 2018.
What?
Yeah. Can you believe
kidding.
that? No, I mean the last part of the big. No, that was. I think that was further north than the Big Dig.
Oh,
yeah. That's wild,
isn't it?
That is wild.
And the interstate system wasn't done until '92, even though the first push took 10 years and all the real money was spent in that era. I mean, it's an ongoing project, and now we're at the point where these roads are collapsing.
Right.
Yeah.
And we don't have the federal funds to really support it because highway repair is funded by the gas tax. And that's a flat fee. It's not one that rises with inflation. It's not a percentage cost of each gallon of gas sold. So it's a flat fee, and those funds are running out and they need to be supplemented. And so now what are we, almost 70 years later after the initiation of the project, and we got to do it all over again. And Niki, to your point, do we have the political appetite for it?
Do we have the political
Listen.
appetite for it? And now that there's a larger environmental consciousness, like it seems like there's likely to be more of a debate about not just the dollar cost of recreating the highway system, but what is the ecological cost of building this system, and then also like what is the damage of continuing to upkeep these highways through cities? What's the damage of running them through tribal lands? Like, there are all of these debates that were taken less seriously or were less in the foreground when these debates were happening in the 1950s.
But can I just say that when they started building these highways, they did it with the gas tax, as you just said, Eddie. But like, they increased the gas tax from 2 cents to 3 cents.
I know. And now it's only I think 13, 14 cents a gallon.
Yeah, that's like, but it's just wild to think of gas in that way, but also as how that little or significant perhaps amount of money could generate, the highways that we all sort of use and don't really think about.
I know.
As we know from Office Space, a very tiny fraction of money can quickly add up to a great deal of
It'd be a
wealth.
big problem. Yeah, Lumberg's pissed.
One aspect I think that we don't think about is that while most of us are focused on like how people use their cars to go to work or to go on vacation, but the trucking industry gets transformed by these roads. So the ability to be able to ship products via truck from the East Coast to the West Coast and this movement of goods across the country is another aspect that we don't think of. We're not just moving people, we're also moving products.
Yeah, because in the locomotive era, it was not door to door, and in trucking it really is. And it has led to the birth of, just-in-time delivery on everything. Amazon would not exist, obviously, without our roadways. I mean, I ordered an easel for a poster for my kid's graduation over the weekend, and I ordered it at, I think, 5 p.m. from Amazon. And it came at 3 a.m.
Oh
the
my
next
gosh.
morning. So, I mean, that's like, do you really need that? But
How many states did that
the
easel
system
go
allowed it. Exactly.
Yeah, because even, I have a friend who lives in China, and she was like, 2 days for Prime, that's way too long. In China, it's 2 hours. You can get anything in 2 hours. I was like, 2 hours?
I know.
But our insatiable appetite for quicker, faster now has really, undermined a lot of the environment around us, to say the least.
It's true. But I think it's also true on the personal level that we reject public transportation when we can. Think about how many people drive into New York City every day and how ridiculous a premise that is, and how hard it is to have a car in New York City. But people just want to be in their own space. And that's what the car really did. The car plus the highway really did, was allow people that personal space and to get them out of public transportation, using up way more energy in the process. But also, I got to say, and I'm very pro-car, good piece of personal protection equipment during COVID.
Well, that's true.
Was a car.
Yeah. No, and I mean, and you saw the sort of policy ripple effects of that. Like, people started to drive. New York traffic got really bad in New York City because more people were driving because they were afraid of subways. I mean, it's just, this sort of backwards
during
thing. Yeah.
the summer of 2020, there were 400,000 additional car registrations in New York City.
I mean, we went from those, you remember those photos of like the perfectly clear skies over LA because no one was driving, and to, more traffic than ever, which is one of the many ways in which we kind of went backwards during this time.
And it's one of those weird ironies or unintended consequences. The more lanes you put up, the worse the traffic density and the worse the traffic jams. It's very strange.
Okay, let's start to wrap up here. And I have a couple just car questions for you. and I'm sure others do as well.
What is the sound that my car is making?
No, yes, this is not car talk.
When that light comes on, what's that light mean?
CarTech does that.
But no, look, I'm a bicycling, subway riding Brooklynite, but I also love cars, and nothing makes me happier than a great American road trip, which I've done many, many times. And so there's an interesting thing that I think you explore well on the show there. And so I'm curious. I think about this all the time. But, you have your highways, your routes across the country. I've done, I think, basically all of them. And so, the 10 is all the way south, and they go up as they go up, 20, 40, 80, and I always go back and forth about which is the best route if you're going to go cross country. I think you're going to always hit, on all of them, you're going to hit great stuff, and on all of them, you're going to hit, some equivalent of Iowa, right? Where it's just like, I got to space out for the next 8 hours and just get through this.
Exactly.
But,
no shade to our Iowa listeners.
But what is, Eddie, in your estimation, the best highway across the country? Which route do you take?
I really love the northern route. Going through Colorado, going through the Rockies in Colorado is incredible. Winding up sort of in the Northern California area. But, you make a great point, Jody, and the larger one is that the interstate system really knit the country together on a personal level, and it allowed us to experience that joy of traversing the country, because the country is so varied and has so much regional variation and so many pockets of cool culture, and to be able to get in a car and get out wherever you want, that's, I think, such a key component of American freedom, and it really does tie us together in a great way, in a way that the locomotive really couldn't. But I love the southern route, but then you go through Texas and you're just like, oh man.
Texas for like 6
I would
days.
say
Right. But you feel like you're on Mars sometimes, which is really cool, But I like the northern route.
that too. I will say, though, if you're driving it west to east, there is no worse kind of like reality check than coming out of the Rockies and then hitting eastern Colorado, which people don't realize is basically is Kansas. And you're like,
it's Kansas.
It just goes from the most mind-blowing thing to just like, you could probably put it on cruise control and take a nap and be fine for the next 6 hours. It's just.
But when you go east to
Well,
west,
if you go east to west, then it's like amazing.
It's great.
Oh gosh, my husband and I drove from New York City all the way to Spokane, Washington, and let me tell you something, Montana, that's a long like, you're going through the Midwest, you're like Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, it's going fast, and then you just hit Montana and you're like, man.
The good part about Montana is the speed limit is reasonable and prudent.
Did we do an episode about that about them rescinding the speed limit?
Yes, about the speed limit, yes.
But and I mean, it led to a bunch of deaths. Like when they took away the speed limit, lo and behold,
turns out people aren't actually reasonable or prudent.
Yeah, exactly. But so one final note. You started to hint at it there, but because like you mentioned, you can get across this country in 2 days, and I actually went and looked up as we were talking when On the Road was written, and it was like right here, and I wonder what it was like in 56, right, 57. I wonder what an On the Road after the Highway Act was fully in effect would have looked like, because maybe you're not going so slow and rambly, and you don't have time to write your 10,000 word letter to Jack Kerouac as you're zooming across the country. So like, how much does a highway system allow people to not explore because they can just cruise and forget all these little towns that are along the way, and how much does it enable this sort of discovery and wonder that you were hinting at?
Yeah, I think it's incumbent on you to slow down. You gotta find those moments to slow down and take it in, and not just try to get there as quickly as you can. You have to hit pause sometimes and really have a moment, and our national parks allow for that, which is great. And that's just, I think, like going through to Yellowstone is one of the great adventures in America. I mean, it's just incredible. That's probably John Muir and the national parks. That's a whole other episode for you guys. But the great thing is America is a mix of like, okay, let's go really fast. Let's go as fast as we can. Let's get there. When are we going to be there? To like, wait, hold on a second. We have these oases and these pockets of incredible nature that you just have to experience.
I like that you mentioned Yellowstone, because I recently drove Beartooth Highway, which is the little road that goes, it actually eclipsed Highway 1 and Big Sur for me as my number one driving experience, which I never thought would be possible. But it blew my mind. I mean, it was incredible. So
That's so cool.
All right, final. Favorite car to do one of these massive road trips in? What would be your choice? Because you do this throughout the show. You kind of talk about your favorite cars for different kinds of things, and
you want something really comfortable, but you also want to be able to take the top down. I'm going to say an obnoxiously expensive car, like new Mercedes SL, something like that can really eat up the road quickly, but is super comfortable, just enough room for two people to have a shared experience. But then you can take the top down when you get to Big Sur, drive Bixby Bridge with the top down, drive Highway 1, and, you're golden.
Perfect. That sounds lovely. And, in our imaginations as podcasters, we can afford that car and we can take that trip. All right. Well, Eddie Alterman, thank you so much for doing this. The show is Car Show. First season is coming out right now from Pushkin Industries, our friends at Pushkin. But thank you. This has been really fun.
Thank you so much. This was terrific. Really enjoyed meeting you.
Nicole Hemmer, thanks to you.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kellie Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
Radiotopia. From